Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Conversations with Calvin, We the Species, with such an interesting special guest, Peter Popolo. And I have to say, we met on LinkedIn, and we're brothers in Rutgers. And keeping with my policy, I'm done talking. Peter, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here. How about a little bio, a little contact?
Sure. Well, thanks, Calvin. Great to be here. Love this whole thing that you're doing. So honored to be a part of it. I'll start with the bio. So I'm a speech scientist and a vocologist, and I also have 2 degrees in electrical engineering from our alma mater, Rutgers. I have a bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering, which I got at good old Bush campus in Piscataway. And then I went on to get a PhD in speech and hearing science from the University of Iowa. And at that time, I was able to kind of combine some of these skills, these life skills. And so I was combining my interest in digital signal processing, speech processing, image processing, along with the training as a speech language pathologist. And so I ended up for the past few years doing research in speech and voice production specifically. And I'm interested in things like acoustic analysis of voice and high-speed video of the vocal folds and
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. I don't even know enough to ask a question, the right kind of question. Did you actually define the difference between a speech scientist and a vocologist? Because when I saw you on LinkedIn as a vocologist, I was completely clueless.
Sure. It's a neat word. Let me start with the definition of vocologist. And it's a word that was coined by my mentor, who kind of teaches a curriculum in vocology. So vocology is defined as the art and science and practice of the habilitation of the voice. And I say habilitation, not rehabilitation, because by habilitation, I mean the day-to-day functioning of our voice and all the amazing things that we're able to do with it. That's what vocology is concerned with. So not necessarily bringing you back to a good state, but kind of keeping that good, healthy state of voice and function of voice kind of in everything that we do. And a speech scientist is just, and actually I'm going to narrow that focus even more. A voice scientist is what I do, is someone who kind of approaches voice production from the biomechanical and physiological, view, and does research and all of that, and kind of applies it to things that speech language pathologists and ear, nose, and throat doctors can use in their practice.
Okay, I think we should jump, because this next aspect so fascinates me. You've worked with actors and singers when you were in Denver.
Yep.
For the performing arts, and this is such practicality But what are some of the vocal skills and features that actors need to have? I mean, you've worked with.
Sure.
It's so beyond just learning lines.
Love working with actors and singers. Number one thing, I mean, trumps everything else, is that the actor needs to be able to use their resonance in order to project their voice. You're not going to be able to project your voice for long if you're just relying on loudness and lung pressure, because your vocal folds are so small and so delicate. You try and keep that loud voice going without resonance, without the help of resonance, and you're going to get laryngitis in no time. So resonance, number one. Number two, incorporating emotion into the voice. Obviously, drama and all that kind of stuff is part of what actors do, but you got to be careful not to let that emotion overtake your voice, because, imagine if you're trying to sing a song that's like very emotional.
Mm-hmm.
Start crying because that song is so emotional. You're not going to be able to finish singing that song. So you got to make it convincing, but you can't let the emotion, which is our fight or flight response, right? you can't let that overtake the actual function of the voice. So that's a skill that they need to incorporate. Kind of going along with that is screaming on stage. If anyone is in a horror movie or something like that, they have to scream convincingly. You have to learn how to do that. You actually go to school and take classes on how to scream on stage, because you have to do, you know, lung support and all this kind of stuff, not to harm the vocal folds and still get that emotion out. It's almost like singing. A scream is like controlled singing almost. And that's something they have to learn. And let me maybe wrap this up quickly. Another thing that we've talked about before is what I call the difference between the street voice and the stage voice. And this is really important because I think all of us kind of have a street voice that we just kind of use, you know, when we're just in casual conversation, not worrying about, you know, trying to project or not worrying about the timbre or tone of voice or anything like that. But I know myself when I lecture or when I get up in front of an audience, and every actor and singer is the same way. As soon as they get on stage, they take on this new, you know, persona, and the stage voice is where you automatically have all the resonance, the breath support, the posture, all of that stuff kicks in. And it's amazing. Sometimes you hear an actor, you know, outside of their venue, like on a talk show, and they sound completely different from what you'd expect, because that's the difference between the stage voice and the street voice.
So it's just so involved. I've said this, you know, our email here is conversationswithcalvin@gmail. If people want to send questions, and there's always the door, and we talked about that before going on air, for you to come back. There's so much to ask. I have a couple more quick questions, but I have a fun question just to throw it out. If you, excluding family, friends, if you were stuck for one day, you are stuck for one day during the pandemic, living or dead, who would you like to be stuck with?
Oh, well, I would pick somebody who has like a really interesting voice. And maybe, so I was just thinking about this the other day, I would pick somebody like William F. Buckley. You remember from the original Firing Line in the 1970s, I believe?
That's great.
He used something that I call the mid-Atlantic accent, which is the accent that a person would have if they lived in a fictional place halfway between America and Great Britain. And you incorporate both those types of American English and British English into your accent. That's a cool.
Was a lot of that his voice. I know. Did he speak with a lot of nasality? I'm trying to remember him.
Yeah, I'd say he had some of that as well. Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, I remember him. He was so erudite. I guess that's a great
Right.
word
And that's like, yeah, that accent just makes you all of a sudden sound smart.
to describe him. 60 seconds or less. Talk a little bit about the research you do with speech.
Right.
Okay.
So these days, I'm very interested in developing a smartphone app that can be used to monitor voice quality in voice and speech patients in their day-to-day activities. So outside of the clinic, when they're not seeing their voice therapist, but they need to practice, you know, vocal exercises and stuff like that, I'd like to be able to have a smartphone app where they can, you know, record their voice, get feedback, get a rating on how well they're you know, incorporating the therapy techniques. And then those recordings and those ratings and those analyses of the voice that are done right on the smartphone can get sent to the cloud to their therapist or their clinician, so the clinician can monitor that individual patient's progress and also see how effective and efficacious their therapy is. And this will lead, you know, to better, you know, evidence-based practice is what we talk about for those type of situations. So it's something that I would love to collaborate. You know, I have my ideas, I have my sketches, I have my wireframes and all that, but I'm not the greatest programmer in the world. So if I ever found a collaborator who's willing to do the actual coding, you know, then I think we could really get
Well, you just put it out there, so it's a beginning. This goes so fast.
It does.
It goes so fast. We've only just begun, Peter. So we're out of time.
Sure.
But we've begun the process to tell people about you. So I want to thank you so very, very, very much for doing this, and we'll be back.